Today is the 10th of August 2018, and we are here in the Radio Gynim studio, myself, Ginny Thwaite, and John Lash, and this is the third talk in the series on Flat Earth. And this talk is the one I've been looking forward to. I'm so glad this is all over. The Sorcerer's Explanation.
Yes. Sorcerer's Explanation is actually the title of a book. Going back to November 10th of 2015, I started writing this book, which I called The Flat Earth Riddle, A Sorcerer's Explanation. And at that time we had a team, the live journal team working. We got 10 people researching it for me.
Yeah, 10 people all over the world that engaged in deep research. 3 months solid. I mean, all of us were looking at it for a good 6 months at that time, but we did 3 months of solid research on different aspects of the flat Earth theory.
Right. I kind of assigned them 10 questions or points that I wanted to elaborate in writing the book so that I would know where I was coming from. So it was a considerable project, and I just pulled it out recently, and it looks like I have at least a 200-page book in the works in a rough draft. So that material will migrate now, and in the future, sometime it will be found on Nemata in the cosmology courses.
Nemata.org.
Nemata.org.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to start, you finished the last talk in this series, talk 2, asking the flat earthers a question. And the question was, can flat earthers admit there are two interceptable factors to flat earth theory? So that's the edge and the bottom of the plane.
Yes. Can they admit that they posit or postulate in their paradigm a world disk with an edge and a bottom? And can they accept that, just for the sake of discussion, so we're on the same page, that those two factors are imperceptible?
And as we're speaking at the moment, nobody on the MED channel has offered an answer to that question. Neither has anybody offered an answer to my question about how do they equate and calculate the distance to the horizon that they are observing.
So these questions are not to be a cause for people to get at each other's throats. I mean, these are fascinating questions.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck with that.
No, really, I'm being the nice guy here.
Nice, yeah, you're being foolish.
Yeah, I'm being kind. I'm being the kind guy. Kind, nice, and foolish. But it's coming down to the end. I'm not going to be the kind guy so much anymore.
So, can I bring up the email that we received now?
Concerning what?
The last talk we talked about the flat earth theory being a psychological operation on humanity.
Yes.
You asked me what I thought it was, and I said it's to split the truth-seeking community. Many people have said that too.
Right.
And I say, from this email that we received from a certain person, that she proved my case.
Unfortunately and sadly, that is true. We're not going to go into that because it would be a bit of a distraction, but I would like to mention what she said. Oh, it's sad that you, John Lash, who has taught us so many things, falls for this deceit.
The biggest lie the Zenosh have ever told, she said. And she's German.
She's German, and she thinks that this is the biggest lie the Zenosh ever told.
I am gobsmacked. I'm completely incredulous that a German would say that this is the biggest lie that the Zenosh have told, the Jews have told.
So there you go. We're not going to dwell on that. It's just another example of how messy this gets and how people get at odds with each other. So I'm going to be really kind and say what I've already said. Let's regard the flat earth, spherical earth controversy or debate as an opportunity. This is the kindest thing that I can say. It's an opportunity. But what is it an opportunity for? What kind of an opportunity is it? In the book, the flat earth riddle or sorcerer's explanation, I took that viewpoint from the beginning. Therefore, I did not start out, and you knew this very well at the time because you were the first one to know about the book. I said, look, I'm not going to debunk the flat earthers.
Well, there's plenty of people doing that, isn't
there? Right. That was not my intention. My intention, in fact, and that is the same intention as this talk, is to look at the questions that are raised, that are valid questions, by the flat earth problem. Just look at the questions it raises and see where those questions might take us. So that is how I am approaching it in this talk. And my approach is based upon the exploration of the cosmos, the inner cosmos of the psyche and the outer cosmos of the perceptible world that I have pursued all my life. And my guidelines for that exploration have been Tantra. Also, to a certain extent, yoga, Vedic metaphysics, the Vedanta.
Yogic philosophy, not asanas.
Yeah. Right, yogic philosophy.
Not the practice of asana, but yogic philosophy.
Exactly. Patanjali, whom I'll mention a little bit later. Vedic and Vedantic metaphysics. And more preferably, my particular spin, which is Mayavada Vedanta.
So people might ask you why you put so much stock in those kinds of writings.
In the writings that have brought tantric cosmology to the world through the work of Sir John Woodruff. Right. Simply because in my own spontaneous mystical experiences in life, at the beginning, and then later on in my deliberate shamanic adventures and my shamanic explorations, Taoistic shamanism and so forth, I found that those books contained the knowledge that reflected most completely and concretely what I was experiencing. So they provided me with the best guidelines of any books that I've ever known.
Well, we're going to talk about that later, I think, about how the observer can manipulate what it is they're observing.
Exactly. That is one of the premises of the sorcerer's explanation. So then, let's begin. I would like to quote a delicious phrase, a delicious sentence from The Power of Silence by Carlos Castaneda. The mystery is not so much what we perceive, but what makes us perceive. This is a very tantalizing little proposition, and I begin with that. It's a great cue to the opportunity presented by this debate.
Well, yes, because flat earthers talk constantly about
perception.
Trust your perception. What is it you're seeing? You're not seeing a curvature of the earth.
That's right.
You're seeing a flat earth.
That's right. So it's really an argument about perception, isn't it?
Yes.
But I would rephrase it in this way to give it a bit more of a bite. I would say that the argument is about the observer-observed dynamic. Okay? There is a two-way field dynamic operating all the time that we are all in. Now, in order to describe this dynamic in this book, I had to play around with a few neologisms. I chose to introduce a few terms for a syntax that is clear and steady and minimal. So instead of talking about a planet, I introduced the term the world event. And I think everyone of good will and rational mind can agree we're all in a world event, okay? I won't even say it's a planet. I won't even say we're living on a planet. We're in a world event together.
So you're neutralizing the disk, the plane, and the planet so that we can actually discuss and debate something.
So that we can break out of the embedded syntax that might be holding us back and grasp and apprehend it anew. I also introduced the term the world setting. So what you all see right now, wherever you are, we are here in this room. Outside is the sky, there's a walnut tree, there are mountains in the distance. This is the world setting. You're all in the world setting. We're all in the same world setting. And we're all embedded in a world event, which you might call living on a planet, on a spherical planet, in a galaxy, in the universe, or you just might call it living on a disk world, which is the only thing that exists. Call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Set that aside and let's work with a minimal description. I also relied, this is going to cover a lot of territory, by the way, this talk. So we'll just breeze through it because I can't possibly elaborate in full every point. In writing the book, I also drew upon the concept of the assemblage point from Carlos Castaneda. And this is a brilliant explanation coming from a sorcerer or a shamanic viewpoint. So Castaneda explained that the world that you see, the natural world and even the human features of that world, houses, cars, roads and everything, is actually assembled for you out of great bands of emanations which are playing or feeding into your aura. Each of us is inside of an auric egg, you remember this. And inside the auric egg there's a point called the assemblage point. And that assemblage point, in some mysterious way, assembles the great bands or vibrations that the cosmos feeds into your auric egg so that you perceive the world that you perceive. And he called that the assemblage point. So I adopted that concept and I modified it with the notion of an assemblage field. So whatever the world setting is, are we on a planet? Maybe we're not on a planet. What is a planet? Whatever the shape of the world is, it's assembled into a field. And the question is, how does that assemblage happen? For instance, some people would say that the assemblage of the world event is a done deal. Some people would say it was done by the Creator God, by some transcendental or invisible, untouchable entity, and that we're living in the artifact. Now the Sophianic view of life says that's not the case at all. We're not living in an artifact of a Creator God. The assemblage is perpetual. It's constant. The world event that you see, the leaves on the trees, the waves of the ocean, the land around you is all being imminently and immediately produced and dreamed. That is the viewpoint of the Sophianic narrative or the Gnostic intel. So that viewpoint I prefer and I have found to be truer, and so have you, because in telestic trance that is exactly what you experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
You experience in a breathtaking way that the world around you is actually being assembled in front of your eyes at the moment that you're seeing it. It's not an artifact that's been done and left for you to encounter. So that perspective opens up the whole possibility of being co-creative with the world event. If it's an artifact that's already completed, you can't be co-creative with it. So you see the perspective that I'm building here. This is the Sorcerer's explanation. Here's a line of pure Tantra, pure Tantric instruction. Your perception of the world event is assembled by the same powers that produce the event, and the entire field of that event, and by the same principles. So the powers that design the natural world, the world setting that you're in, are simultaneously designing your perception of it. This is a tantric principle that I apply. Now, by the way, I just want to add as a footnote, in my handling of this topic, and you pointed this out yesterday, and it's really important to mention because it could mislead people. In my handling of the topic, I refer to tantric physics, and I do not rely on conventional physics to discuss flat Earth and spherical Earth, do I?
No.
I'll give you an example. Many spherical earthers claim that the Earth, the ball of the Earth, the sphere of the Earth, can be covered with water in a spherical form, which flat earthers say is impossible, right? Simply because there's such a trillions and trillions of mass of the planetary body, which exerts the power of gravity that kind of sucks the water and causes the water to adhere to the surface.
But you don't believe in gravity?
I don't believe in gravity.
Neither
That's
do
right.
I.
So I do not buy the gravity paradigm at all. So I am not following conventional physics. I am following the electric universe plasma cosmology physics, which, by the way, is in development, but it beautifully complements the Sophianic vision story, Sophianic cosmology. So
I don't want to segue too far off piste here, but that was one of the questions you got your research team to look at. You know, the lies of science. Science has been totally polluted by a certain tribe.
yes,
A lot of it is based on Einsteinian theory, who was nothing but a plagiarist.
right, and a complete fraud. It's
And
been
a complete
proven.
fraud, yeah. So I just want to make that clear that you don't base your scientific knowledge on. In fact, I heard you say once that you were going to spit the word science out of your mouth for good.
Well, I've probably have done that in one way or another. Yes, it's important to reassure those listening that I do not buy the conventional scientific package at all. In fact, I think this flat Earth, spherical Earth debate is a great opportunity to discover a new and true physics. We're on the threshold of a new and true physics. Let's take that opportunity. Tantric principles. I mentioned in the MED, in one of the early talks, something that I called the principle of semblance. And I apply the principle of semblance here in the Sorcerer's explanation. I just stated the principle of semblance actually in one way. The principle of semblance can be stated in a paraphrase also in this way. The cosmic forces that design the world event also design the human instrument for perceiving it. You're not just here in a body that's sort of accidentally placed in a setting and you struggle with your mind and your senses to perceive that setting. You are matched in your bodily instrument to the design of the world event. This is tantric physics. I don't think you find this anywhere else. Might be wrong. If I am, please inform me in a comment. So, for instance, another statement that you find in Woodruff goes like this, my paraphrase. The vibration of any object, like a tree or a mountain, and the modifications of the mind that apprehend that object arise from the same source. This is also the principle of Patanjali's yoga metaphysics, where he calls the modifications of the mind chitta vritti. Chit is the Sanskrit word for consciousness, and vritti means vibration. So for you to perceive anything, you must emanate and produce in your brain and in your body vibrations, a set of vibrations, and those vibrations go out and they meet what you're perceiving and they give you that perception. So the tantric insight is that both the object and the mind that perceives it are of the same design. This is also called in Tibetan Buddhism samarasa, having the same taste. Now these are sublime concepts. I mean, I'm talking here from the highest level of my experience as a shaman. This is the best intel that I have. And I've shared it with people. And you're sitting there looking at me, and I know that in both telestic sessions and not in telestic sessions, much of what I say has been verified for you.
Yes.
Yes. And others as well.
Yes.
So, now we come to a subject that needs to be clarified in order, again, to have the right context, the right syntax to guide us ahead steadily, to move ahead steadily. And that concerns this problem of primary and secondary qualities. Okay? So let me just read a definition from the internet. Primary qualities are thought to be the properties of objects that are independent of any observer, such as solidity, mass, extension, motion, number, and so forth. Quantity, number. These characteristics convey facts. They exist in the thing itself, they can be determined with certainty, and they don't rely on any subjective judgments. For example, if an object is spherical, no one can reasonably argue that it is triangular, because those are primary properties. Secondary qualities are thought to be properties that produce sensations in the observer, such as color, taste, smell, touch, sound, subjective impressions. They can be described as effects that things have on the observer. Knowledge comes from the secondary qualities, but it does not provide objective facts about things. So this is a big, big deal if you study science. But it's an error. According to tantric physics, this is not true.
But even if you don't include tantric physics, scientists measure things and they're only doing it because they are expecting to get certain results and they're going to measure those results. So merely the fact that they are looking for those results is going to affect the results that they get.
That is indeed the case. And the tools that they use to define and describe the primary properties like mass, extension, are just tools. They're like geometry is just a tool. Numbers is just a tool. You hear it often said by some scientists today, numbers are the language of nature, right? Wrong. Numbers are not the language of nature. Numbers are a tool system devised by the human mind to describe how nature works. Nature is beyond numbers, So that's a very good point, Ginny, because scientists are limited by the tools they use.
And they can't measure everything, How does a scientist measure love? Love for an animal, love for another person, love for a family member. You can't measure that. Not everything is measurable.
And not only that, but a lot of the measurements that they claim to have made, in which they enshrine in the body of scientific knowledge, are completely specious and fantastic. For instance, they claim to have measured the mass of the Earth.
How can they do that? I don't
fucking believe that.
What, really big fucking scales?
Yeah, right. They claim to know the volume of the ocean. Oh, come on, They get lost in the products of their own tools, and they end up taking the readings of their instruments as the actual properties of the world. And this is one of the big perils of science. By the way, I hadn't put this in my notes, but I can't pass this up because I will bring up here the name of someone that we both dearly love, and that is Wilhelm Reich.
Yep.
And if you go and read, and it's a joy to read, and it's a short book, Cosmic Superimposition by Wilhelm Reich, you will see that he says two things that are absolutely brilliant and, in my mind, irrefutable. First, and I love this, exact quote, "Sensation is the greatest mystery of natural science," end quote. Well, the problem with scientists is they don't look at their own sensations. They don't deal with their own readout of their own bodily physical instrument. They're dealing with instruments that they created, with prosthetic instruments. They're walking with crutches when they could dance with the power and revelation of the body-mind. They ignore their own sensations.
They're ignoring the biofeedback
to the world event.
Yeah.
We're in a biofeedback loop to the world event. They discard that and they say, no, only these instruments that measure the primary properties can tell us how the world really is. And the other point that Reich made was that scientists err more and more. Science tends to become more and more deviant to the extent that scientists do not pay attention to the secondary properties. What they smell, what they taste, what they touch. And this is purely tantric. His viewpoint is purely tantric. He was a natural tantrika in that sense. So the point I'm making here is that the world event, call it a planet if you want,
Call it a disc if you want.
call it a disc, call it any shape you want, the world event has structural and sensorial properties. We are given the sensorial properties. We're born with the senses. But we have to go deeper to see the structural properties. But we can explore the structural properties with the body instrument completely free of any technological instruments. This, of course, is a premise of yoga, as you know well. What did the old yogis in the old tradition claim to do? According to the siddhis of Patanjali, they could see at the microscopic level.
And the macro level, yeah.
At the macro, have you seen at the microscopic level? Yes, you have. I've seen at the microscopic level. I've seen at the macroscopic level.
Yeah.
So we have proven Patanjali to be correct.
Yeah.
Right. The way that the senses show you the world event can reveal how it is constructed and how it operates at the cosmic level, micro and macro. It can reveal that, but that requires a non-ordinary effort, something that people don't ordinarily do. It requires a path of going deeper. That's what Goethe's method was. He called it intensive observation. Goethe claimed that if you look at a rose with your given senses, you're only seeing the surface of the rose. But if you learn to look deeper, he calls it intensive observation, you can actually see how the rose was formed. The rose will show you how it was formed if you look at it in the right way. And so that's called morphological perception. All of that is tantric. And all of that is where we might go with this debate if we took it in the right direction and we used it positively, okay? Just to cite a couple of examples of people who have had that micro and macro perception that Patanjali describes. If you read the autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda, which was published in 1945, you'll find that he describes his state of samadhi, or cosmic consciousness, and how he saw the galactic structure, he observed the structure of the galaxy, he observed it, he perceived it. Perceived the galactic arms, the rotation, the earth in the arms. Another example that you could use, you could build up a number of case studies of the non-ordinary perception of the depth design of this world. C.G. Jung had a near-death experience at the end of his life, and he describes in his memoirs, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, how he had an out-of-the-body experience, and he saw the earth, which appeared to him as a spherical earth, and he saw the places on the earth as if he were flying or floating outside, and he observed it. So you can't discount this kind of experience. As a matter of fact, this kind of experience, mystical, shamanic, has been part of human reality far longer than science, and far longer than anything that people consider today as hard science. Okay, one other factor I'll describe that I used to set up this book before I get to the punchline of the whole book. And that is the meme known as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Now, I don't buy Heisenberg, I don't buy quantum physics, I don't buy any of that. But this meme is kind of inescapable because many people are repeating it, which is the act of observation alters the process being observed. The act of observation alters the process being observed. I will say, okay, speaking as a tantric and a shaman who explores the formation of worlds, the nature of perception and consciousness, I would say that this is a half-assed proposition. It's only a half-truth, because it also works the other way around, and you better believe it. The process being observed alters the observer. And this can be called co-emergence. This is the principle of co-emergence. So it's a two-way dynamic. What is observed also alters the observer. The observer is able to alter what he or she observes. Now, here we can talk about our experiences together with great delight, our adventures in Telistic shamanism.
And out of Telistic shamanism.
And out of it as well. But certainly, if you do a shamanic practice with psychoactive plants in the correct way and in a sober way,
staying behind the medicine.
Stay behind the medicine, stand up, keep your eyes open, look at the earth, do not hallucinate. Just look at what you see and watch what happens to what you see. Watch what happens when you look at the earth. Well, the same thing happens for everyone, doesn't it? The first thing that you notice, and it's a thrill, and it scares some people away at that point, is that the earth is moving.
It's alive.
It's alive. And the surface of it moves. It's breathing. You look at the trees and you see the trees are breathing. Look at the clouds.
It undulates.
It undulates and it expands and contracts like a jellyfish. You look at the clouds and they are roiling. It's often one of the first things you notice is that you're looking up at the clouds and you see, well, the clouds are roiling. They're like boiling, roiling. And everywhere you look, and this can be really frightening to some people. Why is that? Because in the rigorous practice, the correct practice of shamanism, you surrender yourself to feel the impact of the greater power of the earth. And some people can't handle that surrender.
Well, it's because they can't
surrender at all.
Surrender their ego, which you have to do.
That's right. You have to let your ego drop. And you have to be able to receive the impact. It's an impact. And when that impact hits you of the life force pouring out of this living entity, call it a planet. We call it the planetary animal mother because it's like an animal. And many people have experienced these same effects. The trick is, if you're going to be a trained shaman, you have to hold steady and sober with these effects. You can't freak out. Some people, first of all, get really nauseous when they see the earth undulate. And I tell you, it's not an easy thing to handle. I remember so well standing on Infinity Ridge and looking out at the Sierra de Libar. And when you see an entire mountain range moving like a snake, the back of the mountain range, like it is the body of a great, great snake, you can get the heaves like a sailor on the high seas. And you can get ill. It can make you ill. You do not see that in ordinary perception. You are benevolently restricted from seeing that in ordinary perception. Because if you did, you wouldn't be able to function. But in non-ordinary perception, you go in quest of that perception. So, the observed, which is the world event, impacts the observer.
And when the observer is impacted, that's when the co-emergence takes place.
If you can stand in that intensity and hold it and be steady and sober, it comes on in the so-called rush. And some people get lost in the rush, like some surfers go under in the wave. But if you can surf that wave, then the trance levels out, doesn't it? There's a distinct moment when the trance levels out. Then you are in co-emergence with the power of the earth that is coming towards you. And you are meeting it with your power. And that meeting is a place of tremendous beauty and revelation and knowledge. It's awesome to know that you can actually meet it in that way. But you meet it with your entire body. You don't meet it with your mind alone. You meet it with your whole body. Your whole life force is co-emergent with the life force of the planet. And this is the beginning of a genuine telepathic adventure. And it's always the same, isn't it? And then the adventure goes wherever you go, depending on the questions that you bring to that moment. So what is observed is the world event in its totality. This is another thing that you realize in a shamanic trance. It's very paradoxical. At any moment, you are in the world event. Can we agree on this language? Okay? But due to the way that the world setting is arranged, you're only seeing a limited part of the world setting. But the paradoxical thing is that when you reach that state of trance, you realize that you are actually in touch with the entirety of the world event at that moment. You're not limited by just what's in the local horizon. And that's something that can't be explained. That's something that you have to undergo to know what I'm talking about. So what is observed is the world event in its totality, but through a limited perspective in the local setting. You are always looking at the totality of the earth, the ground, and the sky. The foreground is incidental. You know, the houses, the roads, the cars, that's all incidental. That's like window dressing. What everyone right now who's hearing my words is always looking at every day is the totality of the world event. But you don't know that you're seeing the totality. You need a discipline and a method to know that.
But John, for the sake of people who wouldn't be able to go into that discipline of shamanism, can you frame what you've just said in layman's terms?
Well, probably not. You know, there is something that you learn when you study comparative mythology and anthropology and all these sciences that have attempted to interpret our experience in this event. It's not observed very much anymore, but I'd like to bring it back to the consciousness of the world, and that is the boundary between the sacred and the profane. As long as you live in the profane and the mundane, you're not going to know that you are witnessing the entire world event. The world event is, the entirety of the world event is reaching everyone right now. It's reaching you, but you don't know that in a profane or ordinary state of mind. In order to know that, you have to reach toward it. I mean, isn't that fair enough? It's reaching you. The whole presence of the earth, of this world event, reaches you every day. You have to reach toward it in turn, in reciprocity. And that practice takes you into the sacred. And if you don't undertake that journey into the sacred,
you're staying in the profane.
You're staying in the profane. It's just the way it's set up. Okay?
Because, well, like you said, it would be, you know, you would be totally confused and seasick if you had the entirety of what you're describing in your everyday life.
Pouring into your body all the time. Of course you would. So let's accept that the boundary between the sacred and the profane is designed into the system as well. And it's designed as a functional feature. You know, you can't function. I'll tell you, when you're in a telepathic state, you don't want to be at Kmart. You know? When you're in a telepathic state where you're open to the inpouring of all the power and beauty of the world event, you don't want to be in public. Because you can't handle that in public, because it's not... We're designed to be creatures of a culture where we have agreed forms of behavior, and then you go out of that culture when you go toward the sacred.
So would it be correct to say here, we all have a psychic shell?
Yes, we do.
So it would break the psychic shell and drive you insane? Yes,
it would. That's in fact. But I would also add that due to being in correction, due to the Aeon Sophia becoming lucid in the earth dreaming to use an Aboriginal term. And due to the fact that the Aeonic Mother has agency, and due to her hacking into the ordinary banal levels of human consciousness, due to all these momentous developments, if you live in her story and if you love and revere the power of her dreaming, she will bring you to this beauty. She will bring you to the same, or the equivalent, I would say, not the same, but the equivalent of what a Gaian shaman experiences in high telestic trance. She wants her children with her in that way. And she invites them. So you're not excluded if you don't practice telestic shamanism with psychoactive plants.
Because not everybody should.
Because not everybody should. Really. And we've learned that lesson.
The hard way.
The hard way, right. So now I'll come to the punchline, and the word that I invented, which is sort of the gem of this book. And that word is based on the word phenomenon. Phenomenon literally means that which appears to view, that which presents itself to your view is a phenomenon. And it's from the late Latin phenomenon, meaning appearance, which is also derived from the Greek phenomenon, meaning a thing appearing. And that is a neuter present passive participle of the Greek pheno, meaning I show. Pheno in Greek, if I say to you, I show you something, pheno, I show. The divine presence of the planetary event, which I call the Aeon Sophia, shows herself to you in phenomena. Phenomena is not a veil or illusion or delusion or distraction. She's in that phenomena. She's dreaming it as I speak. It's imminent. It's not something that's over and done. It's an ongoing dream. And she invites you to come to her in this dream. So I coined the word phenomorphic based on the word phenomenon. And phenomorphic means the way that appearance shifts in interaction with the observer. So the world event is phenomorphic. It will shift in your perception as you interact with it. Now if you're a zombie, and if you're dead, and if your life force has been, what will we say, damped down to almost nothing by the immersion in the IT world, and if you're attached to an IT device, and if you're not in touch with your senses and your sexuality and the delight of being alive, you won't have any of this. So there's a certain part of humanity that doesn't have that and can't have it. That's called Anthropos 10. And we discovered this term when we were investigating the midwife toad, right? Like the Pepe frog toad meme. What is it called? Apoptosis, which is just a fancy term for the shedding of dead skin. So some of humanity today that cannot bring itself to these sublime experiences will be shed like dead skin. But a new humanity will be born in this dreaming encounter, and that is Anthropos 11. So the world event is phenomorphic. It shows itself to you in a way that reveals both how it is designed and how you are designed. But you have to look into it with a non-ordinary view, and you have to bring reverence and passion and love to what you behold in order for that to happen.
So you can do this just from a love and appreciation of nature?
Yes, you can, which is innate to the human animal, but has been, somebody who hates nature and who is biophobic. And I wouldn't know, is there any particular tribe of the human species who is biophobic. Anyway, somebody has tried to break that bond.
Disconnect us.
Yeah, and disconnect us from nature. And of course, this was a great theme of the Romantics. Goethe was a Romantic. And it's no accident that those Romantic dreamers of that movement, 1775 to 1820, were Shermans. And it's no accident that most of the genuine science that we have today in the world came from Germans.
Genuine natural science.
Genuine natural science came from Germans. It's no accident, because they had an innate disposition to this dreaming knowledge, this dreaming apprehension of the living dream. Sophianic message is simple. It says that you are a character living in a dream of another entity. And you are both a character in that dream, and you are a biological creature in that dream. This is a great message of the Sophianic vision of life. So in the Sophianic cosmology, the pleromic aeons, as we call them, the gods of the galactic center, are those who emanate the world event. They emanate the field of the galaxy. And within that field, Sophia herself emanates the planetary world event. And they do it in such a way that it appears to you so that it invites you to interactivity. And I must stress, though, that interactivity is achieved through your entire body instrument. It's not achieved simply by the mind or even simply by the heart, but it's achieved by mind, heart, senses, and your sexuality is what grounds you in the telluric field of the earth.
Oh, and there's been another attack by a certain biophobic tribe on humanity's sexuality.
Has there? How did that come about?
Pornography.
Pornography, that's right. You'll find that human sexuality is under attack from the enemies of life and the archonic agents on the planet. Well, your sexuality, which is an expression of this force called Kundalini in your body, is actually what grounds you into the earth and connects you with nature. Kundalini is a grounding force. And so the enemies of life have done everything they can to distort and profane sexuality so that grounding force is unstable.
So we're coming up to the 47-minute mark. I think you've got a little way to go yet, so shall we end this one here?
Yeah, why don't we cut this here, and then we'll continue in part 2 of the Flat Earth Riddle, A Sorcerer's Explanation.